Hey y'all, happy to be in Austin. My office is right around the corner, so I'm extra happy to be here. And I'd love to invite to the stage a few of these folks we're talking to. I believe we'll have someone calling in remotely, which is Peldi from Balsamiq, and he'll be on the screen. But also would love to invite Liam Martin, who's the CIO of Time Doctor, and also co-runner of Running Remote, and Sean Campbell, founder of Cascade Insights. All right. And hopefully Peldi will pop up here as well. Hey, Peldi. Nope.
We can't hear you, but you've got a glorious beard.
You're looking
Much
great.
better than mine. Oh, and I forgot to take my hat off. I was just introducing Tulsa Remote over there, and you can be in two places at the same time.
I love the effort. You almost made it work.
Yeah.
But, well, while we get the AV sorted out, I would love to have y'all introduce yourselves. Liam, could you tell us a little bit more about Time Doctor?
Sure. So Time Doctor is a time tracking tool for remote teams. We've been operating since 2011. And we have team members in 46 different countries all over the world. And actually, in 2018, we were really frustrated on trying to figure out how to scale remote organizations. And so I was actually talking with Igor, and I said, how do we get to from 100 people to 500 people? And there was a whole bunch of information on how to become a digital nomad, how to hire a virtual assistant, but there was very little information from people like Zapier or WordPress or GitLab or GitHub. And so I knew a lot of those people, and I said, let's just do one. And that started in 2018, the first Running Remote, and I think this is the 8th year that we've been doing it, which kind of blows me away.
Incredible. Very happy to be a part of it. Sean?
Yeah, so my name's Sean. I own a company called Cascade Insights. First off, I want to say I love that door. I'm big into sci-fi. That looks like a portal to another world or something like that. I want to know what's behind that. But anyway, I own a company before that called Tree Leaf Solutions. So I've been a business owner now for 25 years as of last summer. I'm officially 54, so I've had a decent run at it, I guess. And
You're good
the
to
weird
go,
thing
Peldi,
is
whenever
that
the
whole time
adjustment.
I've been remote. So I was remote with a team long before it was cool. I mean, I remember going to talk to some guy at Intel, and he said, you don't have an office? Long pause, circa 2001. And I quit back, well, you could pay for it. I was a little testier back then. And he didn't get it. He literally didn't even get it, if you think about it. And so things have definitely changed. Cascade Insights, we do market research and training and mentorship around AI. So basically, if you have an AI solution, we help you get it researched, adopted, sold, marketed, and then we also help people adopt AI organizationally. My side hustle has always been teaching. I teach at George Fox University. I teach a generative AI's course, Impact on Business, and an AI consulting course. And I've also taught the B2B sales course there. And I've also in the past taught MBA students at Willamette and places like that. But just glad to be here because I've been passionate about remote since basically I started my first company.
Amazing. Great to have you. And Peldi, let's see if your AV is working now.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Still no go. I'm not sure.
No?
I know.
Closed caption.
I am
Let's go
sad.
with closed caption.
I do not know how
Oh,
to
no, we've got you.
sign language.
There you go.
Hello?
Yes.
Hey, we got
Yes?
you.
There we go.
Welcome.
Hey! Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me remotely. I think it's very fitting that I joined remotely from Italy. I'm sorry for my enormous size of my face, but it is what it is. And I run a company called Balsamiq, which I founded in 2008. And we make a low-fidelity wireframing tool for product managers, founders, and anybody with an idea who has to turn it into reality. We are remote since the very beginning. I started a company in Italy because I couldn't afford to live in California and bootstrap the company. So I moved back to Italy, where I'm from. And but my second employee was in California because most of our customers were there, and so we've been remote. We used Skype back in the day.
Amazing. Well, excited to have all three of you here. The session title is Remote OGs. And so I'd love to just dig in a little bit more about how conscientious that decision was to start your company as remote and start remote long before it was cool, as we've been saying. And just kind of dig into what was that decision process like and what were the early hurdles that you didn't expect?
I'll go first. It was actually funny because we were talking about just like compliance back in like 2010 to 2015 time. Yep. We still have an office in Las Vegas because to actually register like an LLC and a corporation, all that kind of stuff, now you can go to Stripe and you can be set up in like 10 minutes with a registered agent, so you can set up an address to be able to have a corporation, all that kind of stuff. And because we set that up initially, we still have to keep it. So it's still there. And just basically it's like where mail goes and then gets digitized. But it was so difficult to be able to actually have real legitimate companies take you seriously, particularly credit card processors. So they would shut us down. You know, we would just be doing business and they're like, well, where are you located? Well, it says you're remote, you know, on your website. Right. So that's sketchy for us, and we're just going to give you 30 days to be able to basically move all of your credit card transactions to another company, and then we're going to shut you down. And those are the types of things that in the earlier days, it was so much more difficult to be able to operate remotely in comparison to today. I'm feeling very old even saying that statement, but it's very, very true.
So basically, why did I pick it?
Yes, yeah.
I wanted to be present. That was the thing. You know, I didn't even have a kid when it started. You know, I was married, but I looked at it and I thought, if I can do this, why wouldn't I do it, right? I mean, why do I want to pay for an office? Why do I want to pay for, you know, electrics and everything else, right? Those kinds of things. And so, and then that just kind of snowballed because I ended up being more present in the lives of my kids, and I can like go volunteer, and it seems really obvious now, but it was kind of radical back then because, to your point, it didn't seem real. Like if you said you owned a business and you didn't have an actual place you drove to in the morning, everybody was like, well, you don't really own a business, right? And it's like, I couldn't ever get back all of that time I spent with even my kids, just to emphasize that. I mean, we've literally watched like whole seasons of like Voyager and a lot of other sci-fi shows, you know what I mean, over lunch as they grew up because they would just like be home in the summer, right? And I wasn't, you know, maybe I was on a plane occasionally somewhere or whatever, but most of the time I was just there. And you just can't replicate that. You just can't. Deep at the heart of being remote, I think, is this ability of being present. And all the quality time in the world, that's just bogus. Some things you just need to be there for an extended period of time for them to really work out well. So that's my take.
Yeah, love it. And Peldi.
Mostly it's because I wanted to live in Italy, where my family is. I also had a 2-year-old at the time when Balsamiq got started, and I wanted to be home as much as possible. But then, since the very beginning, half of our customers are located in the U.S., and so I needed a customer support person to be local so that I wouldn't have to work until late at night every night. I did that for a while. But then after about 6 months, that was my first hire.
Man. Well, thank y'all for sharing. And it sounds like this concept of presence is really a through line. How can we be present in our lives and at work? And working remotely enables that in a really great way. I also know, Peldi, you shared with me a little bit about the nest mentality and how lunches were something that kind of pivoted you guys to going from hybrid to fully remote. I thought it was an interesting share. Would you mind telling us more about that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I always told everybody at the company that we were remote first, that coming to the office was optional. And as the company grew, we started hiring more people in Bologna, where I'm from. And so we started needing an office. We thought we needed an office at the time still. And people will come to the office quite a bit, even though I kept saying, you don't have to come. And I was always very afraid that people who were in California, the US in general, or even in Europe, the employees, that they would feel left out for not being able to have access to the office. And so our first 2 offices were as bare bones as they could possibly be. I mean, even IKEA was to for us. And that was my way of showing everybody, hey, yes, we do have an office, but it's terrible, right? And that was a big mistake because then I realized that no one was happy. Um, it turns out that, well, I got a puppy at some point, and so I started bringing the puppy to work, and that didn't work. The puppy was just too rambunctious and wanted to walk around. And so I started working only remotely for a couple of months because of the puppy. And all of a sudden, I noticed that everybody else stopped going to the office too. And so that really opened my eyes that it wasn't uh, the the fact that people felt like they wanted to had to be at the office, that they had to be at the office. It was more about because I was there. And so, because then we could go to lunch and have the strategic discussions at lunch or whatever. And so the people in Italy still felt like that there was value going to the office, and the people abroad felt left out of the lunch discussions. And so since then, I have not worked at the office a single day. That was maybe 10 years ago.
That reminds me briefly that, I think for working at home, I think our cats are consistently unhappy with that, and our dogs are really happy. Because I have a Labrador, two of them, and two cats. I think the cats would have been happy if I just did an office at the end of the day.
You can get an office just for the cats, maybe. Yeah.
They would probably actually appreciate that.
Well, it's really interesting to hear, and I'm curious, as you guys have seen this landscape of remote work change, more and more folks are becoming remote. How often do you feel it's necessary to get FaceTime with folks? Obviously, Peldi, you have this. He told me about this concept of the nest, and they bring people kind of to fly in once in a while, and they leave.
Right.
I'm curious how each of you approaches that.
So we do we used to do it once a year, and now we've done it twice a year, where we just fly into a city and we just have fun, basically. There's no PowerPoint. There's no meetings about work. If an employee tries to approach me about work, I actually just steer the conversation politely to the hike we're on or whatever. They all get it eventually. The trips are obviously short enough to allow for that. It's not like a 3-week, siesta in the middle of the summer or anything like that. But that's basically what we do. And honestly, other than that, everything else is just remote. So, I don't really feel a desire to do more than that, and I don't even really feel like the staff feels like a desire to do more than that. It's kind of funny because they might want it as we get halfway through the year, but then I find if I say, okay, now get on a plane, go meet you know what I mean? They're like, no, I'd rather stay home with the dog, kind of thing. So anyway, that's how we do it.
That makes sense. Liam?
We try to do one per year at least, and then depending upon the department, the executive team will meet multiple times per year. But in the earlier days, we had everyone fly into one particular location once per year, and that was really fun. And what we like in our culture is we want to fly into somewhere that's just a little bit more difficult to get into. So Bali or Hong Kong or Dubai or Istanbul or Marrakesh, those types of places. Not the kind of okay, we're all going to go to Orlando, right? It's pretty much everyone's been there and they want to go back. So going to more interesting places that are a little bit more difficult to be able to get into and understanding those types of cultures, to me, is really exciting because I get to basically travel on the company's dime. And then I think a lot of employees really look forward to it. It's something that's a huge added benefit that not many people really talk about, which is you essentially get a free trip to somewhere interesting once per year. And if you're aligned to that culture, right, if you want to go to cool and interesting places, then that's a huge benefit for you. If it's not, then it's not.
Really interesting, and not enough Disney adults on your team, I guess. But
we have a few, but yes, you're right.
That's good. Maybe Orlando next time. And Peldi, could you share your concept of the nest? And
Yeah.
do you guys go other places, or are you bringing folks to Italy regularly?
Well, so we started by when we were smaller, we would go somewhere that was close to one of the employees. So near Paris because we had an employee there, and then we did the next one in New York because we had an employee there, and so that was nice because then we would go and visit their home as well, as a team. And in the first few years, the retreat was working. That's where we tackled all the hard things during the week of the retreat, and over time, we evolved to being better at working remotely and not needing the in-person time to work. And again, we shifted to primarily hanging out, making memories, sharing jokes, doing activities together. In the last few years, we kind of outgrew that phase because we were too many. We couldn't rent a villa anymore. We had to start going into a hotel. And I decided to build what we call the Nest, which is an office in Bologna that is the kind of the tangible embodiment of the Balsamiq values. We try to really infuse it with our culture as much as possible, and that is now where we have the yearly retreats, because we feel like we call it the Nest because it's kind of like our home. Everybody's home. Um, Only a couple of people a week go and actually work there, but during the retreats, it's 30 people for the whole week. Or sometimes we have departments do their own department retreats, and so anything. We have it ready for us, and it's all super organized. It's very easy to organize compared to the older retreats because it's always the same now. Um, so yeah, so when I built the office, I told the architect, you have to build me the most gorgeous, and no one's gonna go there. Trust me, it's the future.
That's great. I'm excited. I want to come to the Nest one of these days. But as we
Absolutely.
as we think about kind of how you guys started and thinking about this idea of presence as being really central to being remote, I think about choosing the right people for my teams and how to keep them present once they're there and stay in alignment with them. And I know that's a struggle I've had with my hybrid team, who's largely remote. I'm curious over this, 15 plus years, maybe to start, what are some key skills or behaviors that you look for when interviewing that help you identify that this person will work well in a remote environment or fit into your remote environment?
I'll take that one off the top. We have a value which we call self-guided missile. So it's like, there's the target, hit the button, missile goes around, and we don't tell you where to go, how to actually achieve that particular goal. But what we want you to do is hit the target, however you want to be able to do that. And those types of people are so critical inside of remote organizations because you don't have the synchronous time with, and also synchronous time is actually in a lot of cases counterintuitive and counterproductive towards the actual output of the organization. So you want self-guided missiles to be able to actually go out and do the thing that you want done, however they want to actually do it. And you have to release a lot of control in that process as well. So you can't just say, okay, well, this is exactly the way that I want you to do it. It's like, no, I want to actually measure results, not how you got to that particular result.
That's helpful.
For me, I would say it's maybe two things. One thing I try to focus on, or managers try to focus on, and something I look for in employees, which will be ironic because I wasn't good at it at all in my earlier career. Principles over process is the first thing. I know there are like priests of process probably in this room who will be like, document everything, write everything down. I've read all those books. The thing about remote is I feel ultimately the employee stares at the sky and goes, what do I do next? And the book of process will run out of pages. There'll be a moment where they need to think about what to do next. And if I can educate them on a business principle behind it or an operational principle, I mean, I will spend a lot of times in a weekly meeting basically going, okay, full stop. Let's explain like why this whole thing works the way it does, right? Not the company, but this particular operational aspect. So they can get educated and go, when I don't have an ability to talk to anybody because we're working asynchronously, I know where to go next, or at least 80-20, I'll end up in the right direction because the principle is the compass direction. The thing I look for in employees is the ability to write, which is really funny because I was horrible at it, okay, when I was in college. I was in the generation that did not get trained how well to write well, basically. And I think I've fixed that since then. And the reason I think it's so important is there's a story that I think illustrates that. It was right after COVID started rolling out. There was this guy I talked to, and it's his quote, so nobody take offense at it. And he said, I had no idea how stupid my fellow employees were until they had to write me to convince me to do something. And that has stayed with me, and I have quoted that over and over and over again, because the problem in remote is the majority of the interactions begin asynchronously. Somebody writes you something, and if your employee doesn't know how to write effectively, they're just going to be constantly hamstrung. And by the way, if you don't know how to write effectively as a leader, so are you. You know, if you just write gobbledygook all day and they can't tell you that you do because they're just too afraid of it, right? And they're like, boss, go get Grammarly, please, for the love of God. You know what I mean? Like, that's a really important skill. So, and last thing on that is I tell graduates that, like, and stuff when I teach at the university, I'm like, get good at public speaking and writing, because most graduates walk out being good at one, right? And the challenge there is you're going to have a lot of people in life who are going to say that's good enough, and that's really not at the end of the day. So anyway.
Yeah, good writing. Peldi, anything that you have to add there?
I'm absolutely +1 on people who are self-motivated, results-oriented, who can write well. At this point, I think what I would look for is for someone who's already worked remotely for a couple of years, which there's plenty of people now. When we started, there wasn't, but that is, I think, a hack that people can use now, because if they have worked remotely for at least a year or two, then they already know that they can't expect their job to also provide them with a group of friends, right? Which is what people who come from the office world kind of expect, right? So that's what I would suggest to people who need to hire now.
What types of mistakes have y'all made as you've been hiring remotely over this long period of time? It sounds like the self-guided missile principles. I know a core value of ours is bias towards action, and that was like our self-guided missile type of principle. I'm curious, what's like one key failure or hiring failure you've made that you're like, wow, now I don't do this, or I've really changed something in my hiring process because of that?
Peldi, you get to go first, so you're not always last.
Thank you. Well, we don't hire very much at all. I don't think we've hired anyone in a couple of years. We are very small and trying to stay as small as possible in the shop. So I don't have a lot to say. I've made plenty of mistakes, but I don't think that they're most. I think it's because it's my first company as a CEO. You know, I'm a programmer. And so I've hired friends, and that's always a mistake. And then one thing that happens, I think, in remote is that for some hires, it took me way too long to realize that it was a wrong hire, because people remotely can kind of fake it a little more easily. At least they could. For me, I wasn't mature enough to spot it early enough. So we had people who lasted 9 months that really should have lasted 3 months.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest one is during 2020, we had a massive stage of hypergrowth because we're in the remote technology stack space. So 2019, we had okay growth, but then in 2020, we grew like 220-ish% in 1 year. For a SaaS, that's insane. That's off the chart. And we started hiring everybody. And actually, it was a huge problem for me personally, and also my co-founder, Rob, who's the CEO of the company, because we were super intimidated. We were like, oh my God, we're hyper-growth. Like, this is what everyone talks about, is hyper-growth. Well, we need to hire people that are way smarter than us, and we hired a lot of those people, and the majority of those people were probably not the right hire at the time to do. And I think the reason why is we did not focus through mission, vision, values in such a deep and focused way. My perspective is you have to build a cult inside of your organization. So one of the things that I like to do, and I can't do it anymore because now everyone knows that I'm going to pull this trick, is whenever I go in for an in-person event for our team members, I'll say, okay, everyone, laptops down. I'm going to hand out pieces of paper. You don't have to put your name on this document, but what is the mission of the company? What are the values of the company? And I go down and I go through it, and then I figure out, okay, how many people got mission right? And when we started, we got about 25% of people that got the mission statement of the company right. The last one that we did, we got 86%. Now that might be a little bit of a variable, which is they know that I'm gonna drop this pop quiz on them from time to time. But I would probably say any company that less than 50 of your employees don't know what the mission of your company is, then they don't know why they're there outside of the paycheck. And that's the part that I'm so entirely focused on now, is I want people to be part of that cult, love what they're doing. Our mission is we want to empower the world's transition towards remote work. So if you're not interested in that, then you shouldn't work at this company. And that's something that I think most people kind of just see as like, oh yeah, we wrote out a mission, vision, values document, and then they kind of just throw it in the corner and they don't really do anything with it. But you got to live that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I didn't train my first generation of managers well at the end of the day. It's one of those things that I thought I knew I would do well at, and then I didn't. But looking back, I knew exactly why, and then I fixed it. So at least there's that, right? So, I was talking to tee this up a little bit, I was talking to somebody that was a reference of somebody that works for me now. And he's about my age. And he says, you remember back in the day, you could send an email all in caps to somebody. Like, now they would need counseling, right? And I was like, yeah, it's probably true, actually. So I can't do that. And so when my first wave of managers started, I took to heart a lot of their, like, I want to help my directs. I want to help my directs. I want to help my directs. And so I kind of snowballed that way because I was trying to not be the guy that sent emails all in caps. I grew up in Chicago too, so maybe that helped. But that I thought that was okay. But and then I read this article, and to this day I can't find it. So maybe it wasn't an HBR article, but I swear it was. And it had a sentence in it that's completely like solidified how I handle managing remote managers so they'll manage better. And the line in it was, the thing we got wrong about management was our managers are trained to say, how can I help you do your job? Instead of, what do you need to do your job better? And that is like the first thing I tell a new manager. Do not fall into the trap of saying, what do you need? How can I help you? Because that's just going to mess everything up. And so, like, to be honest, I had like a couple years where I suffered through like this interpretation crisis of like what was going on with the managers and their directs, and I constantly had to jump in to firefight stuff and explain things. And maybe a related thing is, and this could probably be generational too, I was more reluctant to explain like how we made cash, how we lost cash, you know what I mean? Like business operationally. And yet at heart, I really like teaching, right? So like eventually I flipped that script a little bit and I was like, okay. I'm just going to explain the heck out of this to everybody. So then they have this foundational understanding. Because I believe in missions and purposes and values, but sometimes I think you get lost in the weeds of the employees just don't understand why you're making the decisions you're making. They just have no clue because they ain't ever owned anything before, right? You know what I mean? They really have no idea. And so if you spend a little bit of time, I'm not talking like an MBA in a weekend, but just enough to back up the truck and be like, let me explain to you why this is going on. And some of them will just glaze over, right? But if you do it 5 times, they'll stop glazing over because they'll recognize something about it actually made sense.
Or 17 times.
Yeah,
or 28 times.
But it is one of those
But
things.
But that's part of your job as well, is to be able to
But it's one of those
that.
things, like, I think Warren Buffett said some quote, like, the reason he reads, I'm not a Warren Buffett fan or non-fan, but, like, he said something that stuck with me, was like, I read all this junk in the morning because, like, knowledge is like an accumulated asset. It compounds, over time. And I feel like these business conversations, they do that. They'll glaze over on you, and then you do 12 of them in a row over a year, and all of a sudden they're like, I know Kung Fu. You know what I mean? They're like, I get it. And then they're like a way better employee and manager, and then they're solving stuff that I wouldn't even have thought they could solve. But I didn't do that in the beginning because I was kind of a little bit old school. Again, I'm 54, right? So I grew up in an era where I was kind of like, I don't really want to share all that stuff. And now I do, and it actually really helps. I mean, maybe it frightens them a little bit because sometimes you share a little too much, but that's a different problem.
One thing that I'd add on there is we have another policy, which is radical transparency. So
great book, by the way.
If you can be as open as humanly possible, do it, right? My perspective is the reason why a lot of employees make bad business decisions is not because they're not better or good at their job. It's because they have an informational disadvantage. So if you have the same informational advantage as the CEO, even though a lot of times that's really difficult for a CEO in order to be able to kind of hand that over. Like, would you give your P&L over to everyone inside of the organization? Well, that's difficult, right? Because sometimes you have to have difficult conversations saying, we're going to do a layoff because of these reasons. But if you can do that, then the employees understand. And there are some rare cases in which they come to us and they say, we completely disagree with this decision because we have the same information that you do, and we don't think that this is the right way to do it. So you have, it's not so much about like, is this person smarter? I think the vast majority of decision-making issues are informational disadvantages. And if you just give everyone the same information, they'll end up being really good self-guided missiles, to use our terminology.
One quick thing on that, just because you brought that up. There's a quote, I wasn't going to bring it up because I didn't want to go super long, but it dovetails off that really quick. So there's this guy, G.K. Chesterton, and he once said something like this, that it's a paraphrase. You can go look it up. It's called Chesterton's Fence. But he basically just says, you know, somebody comes up to you and says, he wrote in the 1890s, so I'm going to make it more modern. But he says, somebody comes up to you and says, I want to blow away this thing. And he says, I'll let you blow it away as soon as you can tell me why it exists in the first place. And that's the line I use with employees when I get some new employee who's like, we should market on Facebook. And I'm like, we've tried that. Like, it doesn't work for who we are. It's just not. And I'm like, explain to me why we don't. Then if you understand that, and then you have a good idea. And then, because that gives me that springboard to have the business conversation. And I'm like, until you understand why it exists, whatever it is in the business, I'm not going to let you destroy it. Because we probably all know there's that tension sometimes where like a new employee rolls in and they're like, I'm going to prove myself by detonating that thing and I'm going to go fix that. And as the guy who owns the place or the woman, you're like, we've tried that. And yet you don't want to be that guy where you're like, we tried it 5 years ago and it sucked. Because then they look at you like, well, it would work now. And you're like, no, that's not actually the problem. You know, so anyway, Chesterton's Fence. That's what I use all the time.
I love it. I'll look it up. And I just had one of those conversations this morning. And so I find myself curious as a leader, hearing y'all talk about these experiences, at the risk of getting maybe too tactical, but I'm very curious, what are some of the ways that you standardize ensuring that the mission, without the pop quiz or in addition to the pop quiz, that you standardize communicating your mission, your values, your principles, and just really ensuring alignment, whether it's, you know, weekly check-ins, all hands, offsites. How have y'all approached that in your teams?
Peldi, your turn, so you don't get lost, man.
Okay. I'm not lost. I'm following. You know, I was enjoying
I know
listening
that. Just didn't
to.
want you to get behind on the chances. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was enjoying listening to your answers and realizing that they don't really have anything to do with having a remote company versus an in-person company, which is great news, right? We all have the same issues, and for people, you know, people in an office have exactly the same issues. So it does not make a big difference, no matter what the people who hate remote might say. Similar for this latest question about communicating values and mission, and I think that you have to do it whether you're remote or in person. For in our case, we have tried many things over the years, and then we realized that we were kind of reinventing the wheel when it came to business practices. And so starting last year, we are now running on EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which I think is kind of in fashion right now. It's from a book, and it's a book about running any company. It doesn't have to be software. It can be a truck delivery company between 20 people and 200 people, more or less.
What was that book? It cut out right as you were saying the title.
Traction. It's called Traction.
Yeah.
And the thing to Google is EOS, the three letters. And, you know, basically they give you all, this is how you run a business of this size. And we adopted it. It took a few months, and they do a really good job with mission and strategy, and the company values get really used once a month. Every employee gets judged against the values every month in detail, and so for us it's been quite transformational, and everything seems here policies all the time.
Man, we use Traction as well. I love that book. What about y'all? What are some things that you've built into your teams and your habits?
I don't know if I have a long answer to this one. I mean, honestly, I think it's a daily thing. It's in every all hands. It's in every interaction. It's when somebody says, "How do we treat a client?" I go back. I mean, we have a list of 12 principles. They're on the website, and everybody knows what they are, and we talk about them. But I don't like walk around like Jeff Bezos, like slapping it on everybody's forehead, while he was there or whatever, right? I don't really want a bunch of robots, and I don't mean that gets you that, but I just would hope it's them watching me live it out and them then mirroring some of that and watching each other live it out, and that's just really how we do it. I honestly cannot think of a time that in an all hands I've specifically said, this principle leads to X. It's more just like I'm living out what the principle means and trying to make sure everybody else does the same.
I think to kind of dovetail onto that, my perspective is in a remote organization, it has to be a lot more active than passive. So in an office, you can kind of walk around and say, well, this is how I act and this is how I operate. And you just absorb that passively. But in remote, it's like, okay, we're going to do our monthly all hands. What are we going to talk about that in that particular meeting? And let's reinforce that. Do you remember what we're talking about? And not only did you not just memorize that, right? I don't want people to memorize the mission. I want them to explain it to me. Why is that exciting to them, right? And why are you working in this company for maybe less money, as an example, when you could probably get a job somewhere else for more money? And one of the things that we get is freedom. So like remote work equals freedom. And we have a lot of our team members that travel 2, 3, 4 months out of the year to different locations. And they're like, yeah, I would get, like, I'm not going to get paid anywhere near, or I could get paid way more money working in London or New York or San Francisco, but I don't want to do that because I love working remotely and I love being able to travel all over the world. So that's fantastic. We're going to take that talent that's really top tier talent, and they're basically willing to take a pay cut in some cases in order to be able to have that type of freedom. But that's just our culture, right? So you have to be able to figure out truly, and we run on EOS as well. It's kind of a weird thing. It's like, I feel like if you're remote or SaaS, you're on EOS. Almost everybody is now on it. But we found one of the only big problems with EOS is how much synchronous meetings you have to do in order to be able to actually have like your textbook EOS. So a lot of that stuff we do asynchronously as well, just as an addendum. If anyone's trying to implement it, I would say don't go to like the absolute blue book version of EOS. You have to kind of build your own version for remote.
Yeah. With that in mind, what types of tools have you found to be, maybe what are the top 2 or 3 tools that each of you have found to be absolutely essential to implementing those structures? And Liam, I'm curious, just since you were talking about you've kind of created this system, what has it been for you?
Well, Time Doctor number 1, which is Workforce Analytics, which is the company that we run, so a little bit biased on that one. But outside of that, documentation and process, and project management. So we use Asana for a lot of that. You can use anything. You can use Trello. We also use Jira for our engineers. But you just need a place to document what people are up to and then discuss those particular issues and have other people kind of jump in and discuss it. So it can be any kind of system. It could be Notion. It could be whatever you want. And then you need some type of synchronous communication tool as well. So in our case, we use Zoom the vast majority of the time. And then also, too, some form of instant messaging. So like I think about like a hierarchy of communication. In-person is much more informational rich than like video then to audio to instant messaging, and instant messaging to email. So if you go, and project management is basically in there as well. But the majority of what you should be doing is Asana and email, right? That's where your base lies. And then if you can't really agree on something, it goes all the way up to, all right, let's jump on a call and actually get this solved. Usually if like someone has sent 9 Slack messages back and forth disagreeing on something, I hit the little video call button in the corner and I'm like, let's just deal with this right now so we can get it out of the way and come to some kind of a conclusion.
Yeah. Sean?
I don't know if there's a better answer than ChatGPT. I mean, that's basically what I feel like I run the whole business on right now. Like genuinely, like, I mean, that is the biggest thing I do all week is like, there's an AI tools channel in Slack, and this might sound slightly Orwellian, but hopefully I've given the sense that in a culture like I think I've built, it wouldn't be that way. I'm like, everybody share what you did with AI this week. Everybody. It's not in their performance reviews yet, like Shopify or Duolingo. I'm sure everybody's seen those posts, right? You know, but it's like I want everybody just like everything they can automate or use AI for. I want them sharing that. I don't want them like just holding on to it and be like, I'll be the last employee left standing.
I think the majority of employees are scared.
Yeah, no, and so I want to break. I want everybody sharing and doing that. And as far as all the operational stuff, I don't disagree with any of that. We. Notion, Slack, etc. The two things I might add to that, I think of a guy that used to work for me, now owns his own company too, he's a guy named Philippe. And he said to me once, he goes, maybe we could get rid of all this crap and just hire smart people. And I think of that sometimes because sometimes that part stack of your company can just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And you're like, wait a minute, do we need all that? And then the other thing I would say is to go totally analog in the other direction, because you hinted at it. I train employees to pick up the phone, especially this younger generation. Yes, you can interrupt a fellow employee. It's okay. It solves many problems in remote. If you feel like it's not getting through, just call their cell phone. And all new employees, I have to almost train them on it. Because the first few times I call them, they're like, oh, it's the boss. This must be something important. And I'm like, I just want to ask about this thing. You having a good day? Click. You know what I mean? And once you break that silo down and they're used to their phone ringing and they're equally used to, oh, it's not a good time? You were like taking the dog for a walk? Okay, we can talk in 30 minutes. Like, that's totally fine. I'm good with that. Like, we're not solving war and peace here. This is just the business at the end of the day, right? I can call you back in 30 minutes. So it's like, I think there's this, in day-to-day, I feel like we're stretched between everything AI we can, and then at the same time not forgetting the analog. I know cell phones aren't analog, but they almost kind of are now, right? Like the most analog ways of interacting, so we don't just like hide behind a bunch of Slack windows and Trello windows and Asana windows, and then the client doesn't get an answer for 4 days, right? Because that stuff drives me batty when that happens. Then I'm like, y'all should have just called each other at that point.
That hierarchy of communication feels really relevant. And
Yep.
how, with the AI sharing, like in what format? Maybe that's a silly question, but are you having them actually just like share projects in ChatGPT, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's basically like a diary entry, right? I mean, we do a lot of market research, so at least my team understands kind of like a diary model for research, right? So they just like, and they'll post screeds sometimes. I mean, they'll post like, 5 pages of junk that they did that week to solve some issue or whatever. And then sometimes they're like, hey, it was a slow week. I've used all the AI stuff I already knew how to do, and here's how I used it, right? But the thing is, you get a big enough team, and there's always somebody who's like, oh, I didn't know I could solve that problem that way. And it's not about the cash register, it's not, but like anybody who owns a business knows, wait a minute, that 1 hour of productivity or 10 hours of productivity, now I just multiplied it across a dozen or more people. Well, that's real. And if I don't do that, I'm just going to get run over by the company that's doing that better than me anyway. So to me, I think it's just a lot of that kind of like open-ended knowledge sharing. And then what I do is I make sure to go look at every single one of the entries and I comment on it. And I'm like, and I do the owner thing. If it's kind of lame-ish, I kind of nudge it in a positive direction, and if it's really awesome, I make sure to say, like, everybody should look at what Elizabeth did. Like, that's really cool, And then when we get to our consulting syncs every week, I will actually, like, kind of cherry pick stuff out of that to kind of, like, let everybody get a little public accolade out of it. And then it's just a little flywheel, And one thing I'll admit, though, really fast, they resisted me in the beginning. Because in the beginning, they were like, I don't think I'll learn something new about AI every week. And I was thinking, I know, not every one of you will learn something new about AI, but collectively you will all learn something new. And as long as I treat it that way, and everybody doesn't feel like they're being individually graded every 5 seconds on what they're going to use AI, which is where I think like the Shopify thing and some of that stuff's not going to fly as well. Yeah. Anyway, you could get me talking about this for a long time, but like,
Sure.
but that's how it basically plays out.
No, I think that's really interesting to hear. And you both have talked a lot about kind kind of hierarchy of different types of communications, different tools for those things. Peldi, I know in our preparation, you and I were talking about how you really let your team run free. It's very laissez-faire from what I was gathering. And you've built a lot of trust with them. Are there certain tools or tactics that you've employed to do that?
It's interesting to me how we all have different styles. And once again, I'm reminded that it's not about and so for us, we use Google Meet for video conferencing, but we because of our different time zones, we only really schedule during the 1 hour that is in common between California and Europe. So all the meetings are kind of, we call it the golden hours. And other than that, we're very much async. Managers will do a one-on-one with their direct reports for half an hour every week, for sure. But other than that, we don't have that many meetings. We do have a project management tool that I built years ago, and we still kind of tweak it. We use Confluence for documentation, and but mostly we are a Slack shop. We never use email ever, and we never use the phone ever, unless there's a fire, the servers are down, and then there's people who we call. But so interesting.
Interesting for sure. Well, I know we only have a few minutes left before Q&A, and I'm curious, we've talked a lot about what y'all have done in the past, things that you've worked to solve. There's a lot changing all of the time. Obviously, AI is changing how we're all working very rapidly. What trends or shifts are each of you watching really closely right now, and how are you preparing for them as you continue to work remotely for the foreseeable future?
You better take it, because I'm just going to say AI, and you can answer that question.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I want to apologize because I've obviously sat in conference sessions too, and I know sometimes you can sit in a conference. Nobody asked me to say this, by the way, but you're just like, everybody said AI, and it's like, well, they probably should. You know what I mean? So hopefully you're getting different perspectives on it. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing. I'll put it this way. Hopefully this is a different perspective. I just think we are about to go through, and this is what I called my AI consulting course at the university. I called it Navigating the Great Reskilling. Because this is the greatest reskilling we are about to go through ever, and we're going to do it in about 5 years or less, and the Industrial Revolution took like 100 plus. So, if you don't actually think through like, okay, can I be the same size? Legitimately, competitively, can I be the same size, the same human capital size, right? What is the right move here, right? That's a question I think everybody needs to ask themselves. Because to be honest, you can replace some human labor with AI right now. You can. So you've got to ask yourself that question. I think you got to ask yourself, what am I going to do to train my people? What's my strategy? Am I going to just basically say you got to go figure it out on a weekend like the Shopify guy? Are you going to do the Duolingo thing, or I'm going to give everybody 10%, but then where does that 10% come from, right? So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about like how do I navigate this huge reskilling and restacking of what we get to do as humans. I don't know what else I should be thinking about outside of the normal stuff. So that's on my mind like 24/7.
One of the things that I tell people, and my Uber driver was asking me about this conference. I'm going to running remote. And he was going through college. And he said, well, what do you think I should do? And I said, you should sit and read about AI 3 hours a day. Because, I mean, when did ChatGPT come out? 2023? 2020, like 3.0.
Yeah,
and
around
above.
then, basically. I mean, yeah, that's when it started to hit the consciousness. And
Right.
Then you got
there was an
early
API call before
2024,
that.
It starts to really snowball, and then yeah.
But fundamentally, when you look at that point, I mean, I remember writing out. I used to write all the copy for email, and then we split tested the AI writing the copy in my voice, right? And it was like, please copy the voice and tone of Leah Martin of Time Doctor and Running Remote, and it nailed it. And then I'm like, okay, let's try to send an email and see what the open rate and click-through rate was. And there was no difference. And I had an existential moment where I was like, okay, well, my 10,000 hours at writing ad copy is now completely and utterly redundant. And do I want to cry about that? Do I want to stick my head in the sand and say, oh, well, it's not as good? It is as good. And we just all have to adapt to that. And I think the cool thing is that if you're in a room like this, you have the 6, 12, 18 months to be able to get ahead of that curve. And there are trillions and trillions of dollars that are going to be generated with you even having a 3-month advantage into what we're doing. So when I talk about where we're going, I mean, I'm copying exactly what you're doing, essentially. I'm saying the same things, which is how do we not do a layoff in 2 years? How do we make everyone 10x more productive using artificial intelligence?
Right, and your points about, like, junior employees, real brief thing. Like, I was teaching the generative AI course at the university this spring, right? And about 3-4 weeks in, and it could have happened at any moment, right? But I sensed, like, we were having a discussion that night about creatives and AI, and we were using Ideogram and Midjourney and, all that stuff. And, like, a couple of the students, started by the CS students that happened to be in it, even though it was a business school thing. How do I get a job? Right, and for like 20 minutes or maybe 30 minutes, we just had this existential crisis conversation where they were like, "Where's a junior role? How do I get a job? What do that's a huge thing." And we probably all had clients. I had somebody, very well-known tech brand, look me in a Zoom call just the other day. We wouldn't need any junior people on our team anymore. I don't know if we're ever going to hire one, right? So there's all this soup that I feel like if you care about your people and you care about employing people, there's just a lot to think about there.
Let's get everyone to the
I wish we all had
lifeboats.
an extra 5 days to go think about it a week, but we don't. We just got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And-
My perspective is right now, let's get everyone into the lifeboats and let's get everyone upskilled as quickly as humanly possible so that they are this next generation of labor. And to your point, I mean, it's going to be very difficult. I was dealing with the creative director at Ubisoft, and this guy makes like Assassin's Creed, right? Like a AAA title, multi-billion-dollar video game asset. And he said, I have 10,000 hours into painting characters or, like basically using pen and paper and creating characters. And I would never tell anyone to do that now in the age of generative AI, because you can just generate as many characters as you want. But where do you develop that taste? And that's a major question that we need to be able to figure out. How do you know the difference between good copy and bad copy? I do, because I can see those two differences, but it's the 10,000 hours that I've put into it to understand that difference. So I don't know. It's like one of those big open questions. Where does junior talent become senior talent, where they've got a point where they can understand the difference between good work and bad work?
Well, part of the way I think about it a little bit too is like, I think there was like, because I know there's a couple psychological terms that have been with us for a while, like there's crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence, right? And like crystallized intelligence is kind of like that 10,000 hours thing. It's like all that stuff we've accumulated, and you're getting at exactly the right point. Now we have a chat window, or as my students like to just call it, chat. Which is interesting if you think about it, right? They've already like just compressed it all down to I talk to chat. So anyway, they're like, they get 10,000 hours out of that. So then what do we do to grow and build that? And one brief thing on the creative stuff, because if anybody hasn't seen this, like the academy, the academy that does, and you can argue whether you like or dislike what they do. That's a separate point. They just put out a big announcement that it's like, they don't care how much Gen AI is in the next wave of movies. As long as it has a human inspirational element or whatever it was and it shows the spark, it's exactly what you're talking about. They're just like, I read that and I'm like, well, the next movie we're going to see that's going to get an Academy Award is going to have 95 minutes of Gen AI special effects and a human director. Yeah. It's done.
Man, we could get lost in the AI rabbit hole a long time, and I love it. It's all relevant, I'm sure, to everyone in this room. But I know we're just about up in time. I'd love to open it up for Q&A for anyone looking to ask these remote OGs any questions.
Hi, my name is Kamaria. I'm from Orlando. We all don't want to go vacation anymore. I have a question because a lot of my work actually centers around managers and helping them to lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. And one of the things I keep thinking about is with AI and remote teams, will we still need managers? Like, you all had a great conversation, and I really, like, a lot of what you said resonated with me. But I'm just wondering, as we kind of if you could future what's coming next, do you think that people will just work autonomously with their AI partner guide person, or will they need a human person to kind of help them navigate works and careers and things of that nature?
So I would say, about 2 years ago, I wrote a book called Running Remote, which we launched, and it was specifically on asynchronous management, which is what I believe is the ideal operating system for remote teams. And when I looked at asynchronous organizations, the most interesting thing that I found was their managerial layer was on average about 50% thinner than their on-premise in-office counterparts. So there were less managers required because it makes sense. You don't have to do constant check-ins, like how you doing, all this kind of stuff. And what I think where we're going, it's much like education. I think we're going to see coaches. So how are you feeling? What's going on today with you? Or your productivity has kind of dropped. What is the core problem behind that I can try to help you with or get through to you to be able to figure out what that big problem is? And there's a lot of defenses that are usually built up, and that's kind of connected to trust. But once you break those down, the real stuff comes out, which is, well, you know, I'm going through a divorce, and I'm really stressed out about it, and that's why my productivity is down. Okay, so your job as a manager is to help with that, not whether or not they filled out their TI-83 form properly, because that doesn't impact their productivity in any meaningful way when you're not actually addressing the core issue. I don't think an AI is really going to be able to do that, but is the managerial layer going to get thinner? Absolutely, in my opinion.
I think you should be equipping every employee with an AI buddy, because that would be unique to your own organization, right? You know, that's going to be knowledge that they need to have. That's going to be policy they need to have. That's going to be best practices. It doesn't replace the ability to kind of like a degree of human oversight. But, and when we get to agentic AI, which we're not quite there yet, we're at like the demoware stage, mostly. We could geek out about that for a whole nother time. But the point is, it's not out there in the same way that chat is, right? You know, right now. That's what I'm doing, because I figure that just makes them more productive and it codifies all the knowledge that we have already. And that just speeds things up.
Peldi, how about you?
I'll say a couple of things. Definitely, management as a set of skills is going to become even more important, because when every individual contributor has an AI buddy, they have to act as a manager to their AI buddy, right? Right? To their agents, you have to. It's your assistant. It's not a human assistant, but it's still, you have to treat it, give it goals and check on progress and all that. So management as a set of skills is going to continue to be very important. In fact, everybody's going to have to learn more than what they do now. In general, I think there will be managers because companies are going to be smaller. When every employee is 10x, you only need a few employees to do incredible things. Some of the the new companies, Lovable is a Swedish company. They 15 employees and they do, I don't know, $1 billion in revenue already. It's insane, right? So I think there will be fewer managers. Now, I can see how individual contributors can become 10x pretty easily. I don't know if that managers can scale the same way, because to manage people, it takes time. After you have maybe more than 8 people, then you start to have, if you want to do it well, where you actually meet with them every week, it gets tough. So I don't think that we're going to see managers of 80 people anytime soon.
Hey, Peldi, one quick thing you said that really resonated. I think you're absolutely right. Like, that ability to like delegate well is critical to working with AI, at least in what we have today. So, if you build that skill up, they'll be able to operationalize that when they work with AI. What it looks like in a year, that's a different thing. But at least right now, for sure.
We have time, I think, maybe for one more question. There's a mic out there.
Hi, my name is Chris, and I actually teach a digital nomad program here in Austin. And so just out of curiosity, what would you tell senior leadership about when they expect to be replaced by AI?
At the same rate as employees.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not trying to be cute, but I think like you see that on LinkedIn. Like every time there's some, like just today, the Duolingo guy goes out and like instantly there's like the Hat Rocks and Flint Rocks back and forth of the employees are like, hey, CEO, you should get replaced too. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, whatever I don't have to do anymore that I can give to the AI, amen. I'm doing that tomorrow.
I don't know if you saw Raj's talk. So basically, Wade Foster from Zapier completely replaced himself with an AI bot on Slack. And no one knew the difference for like 6 months. So, okay, I don't have to do that anymore. Fantastic. I think that, to your point, everyone should be replaced. Like, everyone should try to figure out what can an AI do, and then what can an AI not do, and let's only focus on the stuff that AIs can't do. And right now, we're kind of in this interesting space where it's like almost every month, there's a new thing that you can delegate to an AI. So you're going to have this. There was a recent data set that came out, I think it was from Harvard as well, showing that the rate of growth for an AI to accomplish a task is increasing by approximately 4 hours per month. So this month, maybe an AI could complete a task that would take a human 16 hours. But next month, it'll be 20 hours. And the month after that, 24 hours. So we're going to get to a point where an AI will be able to build a relatively simplistic business from top to bottom, code it, build a website, build the marketing materials, and bring it to market. And you will just be the owner of that particular asset, which is a very wild point when that happens. I don't know where we go from there.
Oh yeah, the vibe coding space is blowing up. There's early precursors in certain spaces and certain jobs if you look at them hard enough that you can see the ripple effect that we'll see in other jobs. We just haven't seen, and we haven't even talked about robotics and AI, but that's for a whole different time.
Peldi, anything to add before we wrap up here?
Well, I mean, what I see is that right now, no one really knows. No one really can see through the fog. We're obviously in a period of incredible transformation, and there is a lot of fear and apprehension. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity for people to be able to expand their knowledge and capabilities in a way that they couldn't before, right? So you could either be replaced or you could be the last one standing. It seems like the more people lean in, the more they can increase the chance of being the last one standing. The other thing that I want to say is maybe we can end on a positive note. People were really afraid of the Industrial Revolution, right? We had Luddites, and a lot of jobs were replaced. And so humans invented something called vacations. And obviously, it didn't exist before. And now employs millions and millions of people. So even if this is a lot of jobs, I'm sure we'll come up with some other fantastic jobs for humans to do. We're very good at that as a species.
On the optimistic note, Peldi, thank you so much for calling in. Liam and Sean, thank you for joining as well. And thanks, y'all, for listening in.